in poker, you can never let your guard down, like in chess. In chess, you can have a bad week and it's not the end of the world. You'll live to fight another day. But in poker, that's not a guarantee.
Welcome to the Lockdown Live podcast. My name is Jamie Flynn. You can get in touch with me on Twitter at jam_fly. All podcasts are available on our YouTube channel. And while you are there, I would appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. Welcome to the Lockdown Live podcast. My guest today is an international chess master and 3-time Irish champion. He is currently a chess coach, YouTuber, and Twitch streamer. He is also a former professional poker player, cryptocurrency trader, yoga instructor, and law graduate. Welcome to the podcast. I am Astaneh, aka Alex Lopez. Alex, how's lockdown treating you?
Lockdown is treating me all right, Jamie. As an online chess coach, I think it's one of the things that is maybe least affected by lockdown. So I'm sort of fortunate in that sense. How's lockdown been for you?
It's been fine. I can't complain. I'm sure plenty of the viewers are well aware of my thoughts on lockdown now at this stage, as I've gone through this question many a time already. So it's fine. Yeah, I can't complain. The weather is pretty good right now in Limerick. So really, can't complain now. It's lots of stuff happening in the world, but I think it's better to just focus on our own kind of bubbles for right now, because too much to take in sometimes. So yeah, I can't complain anyway with lockdown. So Alex, you've quite a diverse resume there. I may have been exaggerating with some of them to a certain degree, but you have been involved in all of those different areas at various times in your life, most to quite a high level. I suppose your first and longest lasting love was chess. What was your first introduction to chess, and how soon did you begin playing at a high level?
Well, this may come as a bit of a surprise to our viewers, but I actually don't have full Irish heritage in terms of my ancestors didn't come from Ireland. Actually, I was born in Spain and moved to Ireland when I was a kid, when I was like 7 years old, and that's actually in the first time that I was introduced to chess. Didn't know the rules or anything, but when I arrived in school, I saw that they had like a chess club, and that was my start.
Okay. So how soon from kind of say learning the rules of the game did you start competing in kind of competitive environments, and especially was there any point where you kind of entered into what you'd consider high level chess or high level kind of tournaments?
So one of the things I suppose that happened is I was one of the culture shock things that still stands out to me is when I arrived in Ireland, and I could speak reasonable English, but I had absolutely no knowledge of Irish culture, and because I didn't have any like Irish roots, I found it quite difficult to suddenly figure my way around like the Irish language, the Irish sports, specific to Ireland, like hurling and things like this. So I think partly because of that, I found myself, having like these barriers for certain things that all my classmates were doing. And I think that left me with a bit more time in the beginning to like spend on chess, which is a game where even if you it kind of breaks down all of these cultural barriers, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so I think, I didn't take it super seriously, but I spent more time on chess in the first 2-3 years that after I learned the game, then I would say all the classmates, and that of course understandably led to me becoming a better player, and that led to more opportunities, because the way chess is structured, I guess, is very similar to how other sports are structured, which is, you can play, everyone in a classroom can play, the top guys maybe will compete at the school level, then the top guys within the school, they graduate to, let's say, Cork leagues. Cork leagues graduate to Munster leagues. Munster leagues graduate to national leagues. And I would say that, to answer your question in terms of where it got to, let's say, where it felt like I was starting to compete with the big boys, was my first international event, which would have been the World Junior Championships. So I would have played that at age 11, and that was sort of my first insight into high level chess, so to speak.
Okay. What was, yeah, I suppose, what was excuse me, what was the experience like as a child entering into this kind of competitive environment? It's, you know, I think chess, it's one of those things where, you know, like there's underage soccer players, there's underage, you know, golfers, there's all these things, but I think chess is one of the rare areas where kind of child prodigies can actually exist, and, you know, young kids can compete on a level playing field with adults. What was your experience in this kind of high level environment at a young age?
So I suppose one thing to understand about chess in Ireland is, historically it was not particularly well developed. It's actually come a long way in the last, you know, five to 10 years or so. And the standard has risen a lot. But when I was, let's say, going through that process or whatever, climbing the ladder, let's say, within Irish chess, it was all very you know, amateurish in its approach. And the first time that I actually came face to face with you know, a player who didn't have an amateurish approach at all, but had an ultra competitive approach, part of an infrastructure, you know, around chess, was actually up against my first opponent ever internationally, who's one of the top seeds in this World Junior Championships. And we were playing the World Under 12s, and he actually, he was Russian, and he was one of the top seeds. And that was sort of my first exposure to, you know, a guy who had a totally different approach. You know, I was very casual. I was there, you know, joining this competition largely because it was fun, you know, the camaraderie, the almost like a holiday, you know, where you could play or a game. Oh, it's a holiday and I get to play my hobby. But that was the first time that I saw some people do not treat this as a holiday, and they have strict curfews. They're working a lot of hours every day, and they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves. They have a personal coach, things like that. So that I suppose would be my first experience.
Did that change? Was that kind of a wake up call, or did that change how seriously you were taking the game, or were you kind of taking it pretty seriously already at that point?
To be honest, I was, I suppose, always competitive person. So to some extent, you're always trying to be better, and always bringing some degree of seriousness. But I guess it didn't have a huge effect on me, to be honest. I still continued to be pretty casual in my approach to chess, like everybody else. And you know, that specific example, the guy was, you know, at some point like kicking me underneath the table, and his coach was wearing binoculars, and he was actually peering into the playing hall with the binoculars for like 5 hours straight, you know, smashed his face glued to the window. And I mean, I think even as a kid, I understood that that kind of high pressure situation is not one that I was too interested in. I always liked to I suppose to, you know, have fun and be a bit mischievous. Like I was also never a part of I was never in a scene where a kid had to choose between, you know, just being a kid and having fun versus achieving, because you know, Ireland just didn't have that culture built up around chess.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like as much psychological warfare as much as just kind of competitive over the board warfare there, with kicking a young Russian kid kicking you under the table in your first game is pretty funny. Do you think where, if you were to create a policy, say, of Joe, what will maximize kind of chess growth, or like give the best chance for creating good chess players? Do you think that kind of Russian model, where it is taking things a bit more seriously and a bit more competitive, do you think that works, or do you think there needs to be a bit more of a balance?
I think, some of those questions, I suppose maybe I'm not the right person to field them, in the sense
Of course.
that, I'm not a sports psychologist, let's say. But I can give, like, my own thoughts on it is that if you want to build up students and like get them to a high level, like students of the game or competitors, and get them to a high level, I think in general, like, positive psychology works better than, pressure tactics in the long run, because I think that when you put a lot of pressure on kids at a young age, I think that the fallout from that can be quite extensive. And I have personally witnessed cases of young kids who showed quite a lot of promise, and having their parents take ownership of their path in chess, let's say, and say, look, this is what you're going to do, because they maybe on some level want to live out some kind of dream vicariously through their kid, right? So I've seen that happen, and I've seen on more than one occasion the rebound effect of that is that the kid says, look, I'm out. You build up a dislike for chess. On the other hand, there are like different examples that you can take that would support one argument of, let's focus obsessively on chess and chess development of the kids, and let's create a structured path for them from a very early age, versus a more laissez-faire, you do what you want attitude. At the absolute highest levels of chess, we have a very famous example in the Polgar sisters. Judith Polgar was the top female chess player, the strongest ever female chess player. She's retired now, but in her prime, she was a top 10 chess player in a game traditionally very dominated by men. And her, the story goes that her father, who I believe was a psychologist, wanted in part to address the question of whether it's nature, you're born with it, born with that level of talent, or nurture, that you can systematically bring up, let's say a chess superstar. And he fathered 3 children, all of whom were girls. And I believe the youngest, Judith, she was the one I just spoke about, strongest female of all time. And the other 2 were either one was an international master and the other is a grandmaster. I mean, the chances that you could just get that level of performance just from nature alone is very slim. So it seems to favor the nurture argument and this, organized, methodical approach. I'm not saying he pressured them in an unhealthy way or anything, but he certainly pushed them towards working very hard on chess from an early age on some level. While the current world champion today appears to have a more laissez-faire approach, and interviews with his father has said, I largely just allowed him to self-motivate. Sorry, Jamie, I think I lost your sound.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I muted there to cough, so I forgot to unmute. What would you say? What would you say your highlight from your kind of underage chess career was? Whether it could be a specific tournament, a specific game, or even a period of time where you felt you made a lot of progress. Any certain kind of things stand out for you for your kind of junior chess career?
For me, I would say it was all the international competitions. I think there's something. And I still get it to this day, even though I'm in my 30s now, so I'm far from my junior days. But I still get that to this day, this buzz of representing Ireland in any international event. Like when you're, for me, the first time that happened was at this World Youth Championships in '99. And so at this stage, it's over 20 years. And in those 20 years, I've been lucky to have opportunities to play for Ireland at junior and senior level. And for me, the pressure is much more, but also like the privilege and the buzz, the adrenaline rush of like just the whole ritual of going towards the board, seeing your name, seeing like the different flags, you know, having your teammates there. And, you know, some events are individual, but some are the senior events are largely team competitions, and sort of, you know, being like, there's an atmosphere. I'm sure you can relate, like with other sporting events, you know, there's always a particular buzz and energy about it. So for me, that was the highlight of my junior days, and it remains the highlight of my senior days.
Okay, yeah, I can. The feeling, kind of, if you're representing your country, seeing your name with the flag is definitely it's such a kind of, you know, emotion evoking thing, and it's I can definitely understand why that's such a kind of positive memory. So we bring it back to your, say, right around the time you're kind of finishing school, doing your Leaving Cert in Ireland. What were your aspirations like for chess, for both chess and kind of life, Joe? What did you see yourself doing? What were your kind of long-term goals at this age?
It's funny you should ask this, because I actually, after when I finished school, I actually had the intention to do a year's sabbatical, just to play chess and to focus. But in the end, that didn't happen. And I think, you know, a part of why that didn't happen is just because at the time, chess was seen as this very niche activity that didn't really have any financial opportunities, except unless you were like one of the absolute very best. And so I was sort of, let's say, encouraged in the direction of something more traditional. And that's actually why I, in the end, didn't do a sabbatical, but instead jumped into a college degree after school. And I did law, even though I was quite uncertain about what exactly I wanted to do at the time. So I did law, and
were you thinking, was there any other paths you were thinking of going down at this point?
Not really, because, you know, I just knew, so I knew that if I wanted to maybe make it as a professional chess player, or at least to develop like my potential as a chess player, I knew that these kind of early years are very, very important, right? So anything before the age of like 21, 22, I think is especially important. So I just had that idea, let's see how chess goes. But in the end, went in the direction of law, and, you know, for something a little bit more, let's say, safe. And I suppose that the reason I say it's funny that you should mention this is because, you know, life has a strange way of kind of, you know, toying with you almost, that in the end, to this day, I've never actually practiced law, which is supposed to be the sort of relatively safe career path. And instead I'm in chess, which is I suppose we'll get to it at some other time, but it's, I suppose, quite healthy as healthy as it's ever been as a place to, you know, make your living from, let's say.
If you're talking about whether chess or law is a safe option to go down, poker is definitely an interesting one. So I suppose you probably kind of touched on it, but what was the initial draw to poker kind of at this stage in your life?
Yeah, so basically, how poker actually happened is funny. So, you know, we were talking about this like chess versus law thing. And so my family at the time didn't want to, let's say, actively support my decision to go into chess, right? Because, you know, I was pretty young, and they were understandably concerned that if I, you know, spent those years moving towards chess, that I might burn my bridges like professionally down the line, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I realized I had a problem, which is like that if you want to make it as a chess professional, you actually have to dedicate at least full-time, like, working hours to chess, to the study of the game. But the problem was there isn't much money. So how are you going to actually support that? Like, you know, how do you pay your way while at the same time still spending time? And it was around then that the poker boom had really hit. This was, I suppose, 2004, 2005 kind of time. And the poker boom online had really, really taken off. And what happened was a lot of my chess playing friends had started to dabble with poker. And the allure of poker was, if you become anywhere close to the equivalent of a grandmaster or even an international master within, if you become the equivalent in poker at this particular game, the financial rewards are going to be way, way greater. If you can achieve a similar level of skill. And I think that was the big draw for chess players who are, by and large used to sitting in front of their computer screen, analyzing and breaking down a game for hours on end every day. That's not an issue for them, but the financial hardship is, so that was sort of the draw.
I'm sure you thought about it at the time. If you could remember back, what would you estimate the equivalent of, say, an international chess master in the poker boom in 2005? If you were, the equivalent strength, international master strength at poker during that time, what kind of money can you do you think was there to be made? Roughly, if you can recall any.
For sure. If you like, let me put it to you this way: like, if you could be, let's say, if you're an international master in chess, right? If you're an international master or a grandmaster in chess, you're probably ranked somewhere in the top 2,000 of all. Of the whole player base. And I think, with that knowledge in mind, you can probably give at least as good, if not a better estimate than me. If you think, what's a top 2,000 player able to get? Assuming decent bankroll management and stuff like that. My guess is decent bankroll management and decent table selection and professional approach. And I think we're talking in 7 figures, right? That's my feeling, right? I had somebody, a close friend of mine. He spoke about this, and he was feeling, man. If you could, he had actually said something to the tune of, if I could go back in time, he's a bit older. If I could go back in time to 2002, I would not have gone into college. I would have just dedicated myself full time to poker. And then he said, made my millions. And then I would have, quit sometime around 08, 09 or something like that. I would have just spent those years, and then, I could retire on whatever I would make. And this is a guy, who wasn't just a dreamer, but he himself made somewhere in the 6 figures from the poker boom, right? So, but he was saying, and he started sometime in 04. He was saying, man, if I knew how relatively short-lived the bubble or the phase would be, and I could exploit it from beginning to end, even learning in 02, learning the game in 02, let's say, even there, he is confident you're talking, you're talking millions. Would you agree or would you disagree?
Yeah, I remember, Phil Galfond, I think he dropped out of college. I'm not sure, in first or second year in college, and I think he said at the time he was making something like $200 an hour playing. Could have been sit and goes, could have been cash, but I remember him saying, he's making $200 an hour playing online poker. I assumed, he had the ability to make $200 pretty much 24 hours a day. That's the way the games were. So I think if you're 18, 19, 20 and you can make $200 an hour playing poker online with pretty low variance, I don't think it's a decision, to be honest. I think there's a lot to be said for kind of life experience and all that kind of stuff, but it's a pretty big opportunity. So no, I definitely agree. I think you have to strike while the iron is hot there, and it's definitely a lesson I've kind of taken and would hope to apply at some point in the future, where you get these little kind of bursts or whatever. We saw it with crypto kind of recently. I know the .com boom or whatever was probably a bit before our time as well, but you get these kind of opportunities in life. So, knowing to really strike when the iron is hot and make as much hay as you can is definitely an important thing. So kind of poker boom times. Your young guy just finished school into college. What kind of games are you playing back then?
Yeah. So I suppose if I could bring it back to how I actually learned the game, I'll say a couple of things on that. So as I mentioned, some of my chess playing friends had started playing poker, and what happened was that the summer before I started college, I started to play a lot of poker, and it was just fun. I mean, poker, as you know, it's an addictive game, and the rush of winning a pot is especially nice because you're not only you get the rush of winning like you do in chess, but you also additionally get like a financial bonus, which magnifies the rush. And so one of the things that I had mentioned is, for me, I still had these ambitions with chess, but I became a bit disillusioned by the fact that my family wasn't encouraging chess as a path, because one of the key issues was, hey, how are you going to actually make a living? How are you going to make this profession sustainable? Is it a profession if you can't earn a living anytime soon? And so I think that awoke in me this like desire to make my own money, right? And suddenly poker comes along, and it's like a great opportunity to say, okay, if I can, like, it's frustrating to me that I can get quite good at this game of chess and still I don't get any like tangible financial reward. But if I can sort of get good at this other game, I can actually finance, my day-to-day life. I've never been super money driven, but I definitely appreciate like all the, let's say I have a healthy respect for the importance of money, right? I mean, for when it comes to, just going about your day-to-day and being able to cover your needs. And so that's actually what happened, that by the time that the summer was finished and I was starting my law degree, I'd actually become quite hooked to the game of poker. And as a result of that, I actually spent many of what should have been lecture hours, and just, different hours that should have been spent in college. I wound up actually just walking from my university to like the nearest internet cafe in town and just like playing poker there, like pretty much all day long. And so I kind of I wasn't too interested in law. It never gripped me. So I sort of developed as a poker player during that time. And that's actually what got me, right? That incentive to try and make my own living, and my apathy towards law. That's what led to me spending my time, and I suppose my disillusionment with chess at the time, that you couldn't make a living from it so easy. That's what ended up having me spend a lot of time on poker. And I suppose like with a lot of things, if you are willing to put in more hours than most into a game, and somewhat like take an approach of trying to learn from your mistakes, then you put yourself in a good position to get better. And at the time, as you just mentioned, is, the bar was quite low. So it was very nice because you could achieve some degree of success in poker relatively quickly. Nowadays, I guess, I'd imagine you'd know better than me, but I'd imagine that a newcomer to the game might get dispirited much faster. I don't know if that's the case or not, but that would make sense to me,
It's definitely got a lot more competitive. There's no denying that. And the idea of just kind of starting out from scratch and being able to make decent money fairly quickly, I think is close to impossible. Joe, if you're saying you've never played a hand of poker and you want to learn the game, how much money could you be making in 6 months' time? I think if you're doing anything other than breaking even, within 6 months, that's a very good, very good achievement. Whereas we're talking back then, it was, you could be playing decent stakes, beating it for decent money kind of within 6 months. So yeah, I think it's definitely changed a lot since then. Was it mainly online you were playing?
Yeah, I started online, but I actually graduated to in-person poker relatively quickly because I happened to have like one of my close friends from school. He, in fact, no, a couple of them, they were part of the UCC Poker Society. And so that led to some in-person games. And then one day, a visit to a casino you're very familiar with, the Cork Casino, which is the main one at the time, at least, was the Macau Casino. And so one visit there, and I mean, at that point, it was already too late. You get gripped by the whole atmosphere. I think when you're quite young, I don't know if you can relate, but when you're like 17, 18 years old, money seems to feel like 500 euro feels like it's more than 500 euro today. Like it gets you further. And so, those cash games were a big pull, even though they were not as big as the online ones, they were sort of big enough to keep you hooked. So long story short, I ended up playing both live and online.
Yeah. Mainly kind of, I know you have played a decent amount of No Limit Hold'em, but you were mainly kind of a pot limit Omaha player.
Yeah, again, that was just because I started playing No Limit Hold'em, and then they actually I would play only No Limit Hold'em, and then in the Macau they introduced mixed games, and I remember still to this day I was like horrified. It's like, oh, gotta learn this other game. I'm a big fan of No Limit, but then for whatever reason, maybe because the overall level was a lot lower, or sometimes it's just hard to explain these things, but I ended up beating PLO games for like having a much more success in PLO than in No Limit Hold'em. And so then I started playing PLO online, and sort of, after a while at some point was more of a PLO player, but it wasn't intentional. And I started off, I suppose, like most people did, learning No Limit Hold'em.
Any particular memories or fun stories or spin-ups or any of that kind of stuff stand out from your time in poker?
Yeah, for me, like one of the most memorable ones, memorable stories about like online play was in terms of where we've been talking about how straightforward it was to sort of beat those games, even if you weren't particularly good, like, to give a concrete example, there was a fellow called Bob who frequented the Paddy Power games, and he was so popular, let's say, amongst the players who were trying to be profitable. The games would build around him, but at the time, I suppose the competition wasn't so fierce that you couldn't get in on these games. So I managed to get in on the games a few times. And one time in particular, there was this pot, like he wouldn't fold hand. This guy just seemed to never fold a hand. And so at some point, I decided to test the limits of that. And I had like a very strong hand. It was like I had the nuts, like the theoretically best hand that I could have. Had it, and I had the hand already super strong hand on the flop. I think what it was like a nut flush draw on the flop with something else to boot, like maybe with like a straight draw, nut flush and straight draw, something like that. And I was, betting quite heavily into it. And then on the turn, I hit the nuts, and then I just like bet very heavily, or perhaps he had bet. I think he had bet originally, and then I raised pot. So at this point, like the pot has suddenly built up on the turn massively. And I'm wondering, is he gonna call? Is he gonna fold? I'm a bit worried, because for anyone who plays Omaha, they know that until the river card comes out, you're rarely safe, because if the board, for example, pairs, then a full house will beat your flush, and game over. So I was a bit worried, but he tanked. I thought, okay, this guy, maybe he doesn't have anything much. And eventually he makes the call. And I'm thinking, you know, in my head, I'm thinking there's at least, you know, 8 or 9 cards or whatever that I have to dodge on the river. And suddenly on the river, the board pairs. And I'm thinking, oh God, I'm in trouble here. And maybe there was a tiny bit more money that each of us had to put in. I don't quite remember. But what I do remember is what he showed when I saw his hand. And, you know, in this paired board with, like, I think it was the spade flush out there, everything, you could have anything on that board. I think even maybe the straight draws had made it on the river, anything. And he just turns up a lonely pair of twos, like no flush, no full house, no nothing, just a pair of twos in the hand, which for those who don't play Omaha, like that hand, like it's hard to imagine any bluff that hand can beat. So like he's calling what's effectively an all-in bet from me. He's calling it with a hand that can't even beat a bluff. You know, for non-poker players, this is literally, I guess, this is something that in my later years, for example, as a poker player, I couldn't find one of those ridiculous spots in the course of 1 year. And in my early years, I could find those kind of ridiculous spots several times a week. And I mean, it was just night and day. So that, I suppose that's one of them.
Yeah. What was the highest stakes you played, or what was the kind of some of the bigger games you can remember jumping into?
Probably shouldn't.
If you're comfortable talking about it.
I probably shouldn't say purely because they were not sensible bankroll management moves. You know, it's not like if you had, you know, some top poker player and you ask them, you know, what were the highest stakes, and they say to you, you know, I played 500, 1,000, but you know, the implication is that they're well bankrolled for it.
Yeah.
So I suppose that was not the case for me. But you know, when you're like, you know, 18, 19, 20 years old, and you've enjoyed some like success in certain things, the temptation to just jump into higher games is there, and I was not able to resist that temptation always. I suppose the thing is, okay, so I was a PLO player and I was a limit hold'em player. I actually fell in love with the game of limit hold'em, specifically heads up limit hold'em. So the stakes are very different because, you know, a 10-20 PLO game versus a 50-100 limit hold'em game, you know, they're different, right? A 50-100 is absolutely not 5 times bigger than 10-20 PLO, right? So I suppose that's the first clarification. But I will say, I suppose I won't answer. I will just say that in terms of like my bread and butter games, they were 5-10 and a little bit of 10-20 for PLO. Yeah. And for limit, it was like 25-50 and 50-100 were much more common. But again, I played a lot of 10-20 limit. So I suppose those are the things. And then there were some very bad decisions to jump into higher games every once in a while that I prefer to forget those those events. I can tell you though that they didn't go especially well.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Interesting that you mentioned limit hold'em there. Actually, it brings us nicely into our next topic. There's a lot of crossover between chess and poker. If we look specifically just kind of at the topic of learning, so just the fact you mentioned limit hold'em, I think that's quite an interesting game when you look at it from kind of learning perspective. I think there's arguably more crossover between something like limit hold'em and chess than there might be. You know, limit hold'em is a lot more of a mechanical game, whereas no limit might be more of a kind of psychological game. So yeah, were there any approaches to learning that you felt applied to both chess and poker, or was there anything that, you know, kind of when you were learning chess you applied when you were learning poker, or any of that?
Yeah, I think that you're right that there's quite a bit of crossover. But I wouldn't say that the two games, like, okay, so what I would say is that the main advantage that, say, being a chess player gives you if you then want to transition to poker is that you're already accustomed to working very long hours on a particular game. Yeah. And you're also accustomed to certain aspects of competition. right? And the pressure situation, those kind of environments. I would also say that one of the huge advantages the chess players have, in my opinion, again, maybe some people will disagree, but it's the fact that as a chess player, you're conditioned to look at your games and continually, if you're an ambitious chess player, you want to constantly deconstruct your games after the fact and break down where exactly you went wrong and replay your decisions in your head, right? And be like, oh, if I could go again, this time I would, I went down path A, but I would go down path B. And the rationale for this is that. So you're doing like this kind of like post-examination analytical work, and it can be quite intense and quite tedious and quite technically demanding at times. And it can also require quite a lot of focus. So it's like chess players are accustomed to that kind of work. And I think those skills transfer to poker in the same way that they transfer to a lot of other endeavors, whether it's, academic life or whether it's professional life or indeed any sport, but I would say a lot of those, I suppose those are the advantages, while the disadvantages are not disadvantages. Those are the main advantages if you're a chess player and you move to poker. But then there are some areas where being a chess player and then moving to poker doesn't help you too much. For example, one of the struggles that I had to try and get good at limit hold'em is that, at some point, for example, I picked up the book by Bill Chen, The Mathematics of Poker, which I suppose poker players would be familiar with. And Bill Chen actually was very, very successful limit hold'em player himself. And he wrote this book, which at the time was very critically acclaimed. I don't know nowadays.
It's still one of the few books, I think, because it's so mathematically based. It's still one of the books that I think has kind of stood the test of time, because you're proving everything by first principles. So it's still quite a well-regarded book.
Exactly, and this what you say about first principles, that's kind of the problem that chess players, I think a lot of them ran into, that chess didn't equip you to deal with at all. And it is that to be a strong chess player, you don't have to have a mathematical background in any way, or this kind of working with numbers in this way. And so for me, one of the massive barriers to getting much better as a poker player, as a limit hold'em player, is I didn't have the background, the maths background. I didn't have. So when I tried to get through that book, I was stumbling all the time because I hadn't picked up those lessons. With chess, if you can barely add, it's not going to ever. I mean, okay, maybe that's too much, but it probably won't impact your ability to perform even at the absolute highest level.
Where do you think logical reasoning falls into all this? Because obviously with chess, like with poker, you do need maths, Joe. You need to be able to calculate percentages. You have to understand odds. With chess, you basically don't need maths in the game. But obviously there's a big crossover between kind of mathematical knowledge and the ability. Well, maybe there isn't. It's like, do you think there's a big comparison, Joe? If you have a high mathematical knowledge, do you think that improves your logical reasoning?
I don't know. I don't want to sort of comment on something that I don't have any real expertise on. At least I can't comment besides, I suppose, anecdotally. I think there are, I would say there's quite a lot of, let's say, technically or logically minded individuals in the chess world that I would have met. There's quite a lot of people in the chess world who studied, for example, maths in college. I think it's quite popular. Computer science is quite popular as well amongst those who studied, and engineering and things like that. I think that there's more of a representation of the sciences, let's say, within chess players the chess playing community, than literature, let's say. But at the same time, I would say that it's a lot less so than in the poker world. My anecdotal experience was that poker players generally, like a higher percentage of them, are like mathematically minded, or into computer programming or things like that, for those who split their time, than with chess, which I feel is still slanted towards those more scientific stuff, but I think with chess you have a broader representation of of interests. That's been, I don't know how closely that fits in with what you're asking, though. I mean, if that's what you're getting at, but I suppose I can't tell you.
Yeah, interesting that you think that the kind of the logic backgrounds in the two different games. Another thing you touched on there about kind of analyzing your games and going through examining things that happened and how you could have kind of gone differently. So did you have any experience with so a big thing with poker that I think is quite unique when you're learning the game is the lack of connection between the input and the output. So if you're thinking about it, if you're analyzing a chess game and you make a certain move, and then you're analyzing, you think, if I made this move, you can see pretty quickly whether that move is right or wrong, and that is a relatively good indication about how good that move is, kind of in general. Whereas in poker, you get this very weird thing where if you fold on a river and you think maybe I should have called, if the guy shows you a bluff, you should have called, but that doesn't necessarily feed into the best kind of strategy for a poker player. How did you experience any of that when you were kind of studying poker?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think that maybe the way I look at that is, I think you need strong nerves to compete at a high level in chess, at the absolute highest level. But you can sort of get by with relatively weak nerves, if that makes sense. Like, there's some of the top chess players, not top, not like world champions, but some like guys who reached a very, very high level, who maybe broke into the top 10, and who sort of rather famously were had a weak nerves in pressure in the highest pressure situations. But you can sort of get away with it just by playing incredibly good chess, and you can survive off of that. With poker, it's my feeling that if you have bad nerves, you're gonna fail a lot more brutally than with chess. And I think part of it is because of this incomplete information. My feeling is, because in poker you never, it's much harder to know for sure if you made the right decision or not. You have to have quite a stable temperament to weather that sort of emotional roller coaster and that uncertainty. I think, like, as humans, the more certainty that we can have in our environment, the calmer we can sort of be. And the more uncertain and chaotic things become, the more stressed we can get. And I think as poker, when I played poker, it was like you're constantly, questioning yourself. You're questioning, am I actually, am I making, not just am I making the right decision, am I improving? Am I gonna, is things gonna, how much of what I like? And you go down this rabbit hole, right? With poker. Chess doesn't really give you that problem, because with chess, it's much harder to deceive yourself. With chess, you're confronted with the reality of how well or how badly you play. And, there's no, because it's a game of complete information, there's no way to escape that.
I think it's, if you make a blunder in a chess game, 5 times in a row, you're probably going to lose 5 games in a row. Whereas you could make a horrific call on the river 5 times in a row in a poker game, and it might just happen that the guy was bluffing those 5 times, but in general your call is terrible. So that feedback loop is quite it's quite fucked up in poker. You know, it really it's very difficult from the learning experience. I found that people struggle in that they do a thing and the thing works, and most logically people would think, okay, so the thing you're doing is good, whereas in poker that's not the case. It's very possible that it could be a big mistake, but it's until you have such a large sample size, it's very hard to know whether what you're doing is a mistake or not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And in chess, there is definitely a huge role of psychology. I don't want to, and there are exploitative approaches to playing chess. For example, I might play somebody and I might make a judgment call that person doesn't handle certain positions that might arise out of, some particular opening, let's say. And so I try to bring the game and take the game in that direction. And then, afterwards, maybe my opponent outplays me. So there is like uncertainty when I'm reflecting on my decision. Did I make the right call in taking the game in that direction or not, right? Or like, did he outplay me because I made a bad decision to take the game in that direction? Or was my judgment actually correct, but he outplayed me anyway because, that's just how it happens. So there are cases where you can imagine there is uncertainty in chess, but in comparison, I mean, it's night and day, because if I'm, for example, the world's best chess player, and you take a brand new chess website and suddenly I join it, within about maybe 30, 40, 50 games, I'm probably going to have one of the highest rankings on the site, certainly within 100 games. So very quickly you establish yourself at the top, and you say, this is my level, and you can't escape from that level. And the other thing I wanted to say in terms of the importance of good nerves in chess versus in poker is that chess players tilt, just like poker players. Chess players definitely tilt. If you lose too many games in a row, you can go on tilt. But the difference is, let's say the world champion goes on complete monkey tilt for a tournament, and things like that, similar things like that have happened. But then, he can shake that off, and 2 weeks later he's back at his next event, or a month later he's back at his next event, largely unscathed, right? He just didn't win any money, or he whatever, but his level of chess remains roughly the same. Whereas with poker, there's countless stories of people just destroying themselves because they burned through their bankroll in the space of, a week of going on tilt, or even, you might say to me, a week is too much, like 5 hours of going on tilt, right? So in poker, you can never let your guard down, like in chess. In chess, you can have a bad week and it's not the end of the world. You'll live to fight another day. But in poker, that's not a
guarantee. Machine learning and AI is a pretty hot topic in poker and chess and everything in the world right now. Using game engines to analyze chess is something that predates poker. It's a big thing in poker now, using machines and computer programs to analyze, but it's been around in chess obviously for quite a while. Can you tell me what chess engines were like, say, 15 years ago compared with what they're like now?
Yeah. So I suppose the first chess engines would have been probably something like, when people started to tinker with them in some kind of significant numbers, I think was the 90s. Before that, there were definitely chess engines, but I don't know the exact year that it started, but they weren't popular. Definitely by the time that I came to chess, at the international competitions, it was around 20 years ago that I first started to experience, working with engines. But at the time, the chess engines were so weak that you couldn't really trust them. Like you had this kind of grandmasters, the highest title in chess. Grandmasters, they would work with engines, and Garry Kasparov, who was world champion around those times, and one of the greatest ever, like one of the big greats of the past. He like he worked with engines from a very early point. And but at the time, the way it worked was you had a kind of a 2 + 2 is 5. If you take the player and then the engine, there was a synergy, but only if the player was strong enough to like judge when the engine was spitting out good ideas, good lines, good variations, and when the engine couldn't be trusted. So like there was a very active human role to be played, you know, if that makes sense. And that was in the 90s, and that continued on maybe in the first half of the noughties, something like that. But it was around maybe 2006, 2007, that at that point, the engines were already much, much stronger, to the point where they could be trusted a really high percentage of the time. You know, most of the time you could trust that whatever line the engine was suggesting you play was actually a much better choice than whatever path you went down. So there started to be a bit less human involvement and human judgment.
Sorry, Alex. Was that at the highest level as well? Grandmasters would be analyzing games and just trusting what the computer said, pretty much just at face value.
Yeah. Although the computers were I mean that's an oversimplification. There was definitely a lot of grandmaster judgment in certain situations, but they trusted them enough that we actually got a few sort of funny situations where, grandmasters would leave the engine running for quite a long time, analyzing a position, and then they tried to get it to analyze in enough depth that whatever it was suggesting was trustworthy. But even then, the computers were not quite so reliable, and so what it led to was some situations of strong top grandmasters losing games against others in a way that was like, basically they would whip out 20 moves of opening theory, all from their home lab, and then they would just actually resign a couple of moves later. And the reason for this was that their computer at home had actually sent them to a trap, right? Had sent them in the wrong direction. The computers were good enough for a period of time, good enough that even strong grandmasters would trust what they say, but not quite good enough, not quite so infallible that they didn't send, the occasional grandmaster to an early grave, right? I mean, so some games were famously decided in that way,
Quite interesting. Definitely a lot of similarities with poker at the moment, where big debate going on about how much the machine should play in your kind of learning of the game. And there's been a few instances where the computer or the program has said, this is a plus ED play here, and a lot of people are kind of looking at it thinking, okay. So it's definitely some interesting kind of crossover that you mentioned, that where most of the time it worked, but there was still kind of some doubt with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I suppose to continue the timeline of events, let's say, by now, in the last few years, computers have become so strong that, let's put it this way, a computer could play with a very substantial handicap against the world champion, like literally giving maybe 2 pawns at the start, just giving them to the world champion. And in a 10-game match, I think the world champion would get completely demolished still.
Wow.
Like that's how much stronger. In rating terms, which is the rating system, it's called like ELO rating system. And this is a way in which people get a very quick view of, a quick assessment of how strong a player is. The world champion, to put it in perspective, my rating is like 2,400 or so. It won't mean anything to non-chess players, but to put it in perspective, a beginner might start out with a rating like after playing for like a year, maybe that player is playing around 1,000 in strength, something like that. As you progress, at some point, so I'm at around, say, 2,400, something like this. And then you keep on going, the highest rated player at the moment is around 2,850 or so, world champion.
Yeah.
And he's 2,850. So there's about a 450 point gap, which I don't want to understate. That's an absolutely astronomical gap, like 450 points at that level. There is tournaments between computers, like engine world championships. And those guys have ratings, like those engines, the computers have ratings of about 3,300 or so, or 3,400, even higher I've seen. So basically what this means is that the gap between me and the world champion, at least numerically, is lower than the gap between the world champion and the best computers, which I suppose is not surprising, but it's also, hopefully it gives a feel for the golf in class. Like, I mean, they've left humans in lost at this stage.
Yeah. Do you know how these programs work? As in, like, before, if we say the Deep Blue versus Gary Kasparov was probably obviously the most kind of famous match. There was a lot of imparting kind of human knowledge into Deep Blue. So Joe, a lot of experts in certain openings would like program their knowledge into the computer, and he would kind of learn this way. I assume that there must be big advances though in how the engines actually function now. There's surely a lot more just self-learning through AI and that kind of stuff. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So there was a very, very important moment for chess when maybe some people would have heard of AlphaGo, or if not AlphaGo, maybe if you're in the chess world, AlphaZero. Basically, these were programs using neural networks and machine learning. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on these topics, but they applied these machine learning principles to trying to design computers that could compete. Initially, they focused their attention on the game of Go, because rather famously, the game of Go was considered inaccessible to being solved by computers, right? For whatever reason, there were too many possibilities, and you couldn't design a computer that is going to beat the world's best at Go. And so a branch of Google called DeepMind, incidentally led by a very, very strong chess player in his own right, Denis Hassabis, who then left the game of chess to pursue machine learning and all of this. So he first focused with his team on beating the game of Go, designed using machine learning principles, designed what they called AlphaGo. And AlphaGo, then they put it online, facing off against the world's best in Go, and they all got crushed. And then they turned their attention to chess and came up with and developed, using the same principles, developed AlphaZero. And the way that these programs learned is they actually would I think the only thing that they were, the only input that they received was the rules themselves of the game. And after that, the way it worked, my simple understanding is it would play against each other, right? Like it would play against itself just many, many, many times. And through this process, gradually learn by trial and error, learn how, what strategies work and what strategies don't. And this was a completely new approach to developing a strong engine, because traditionally, as you mentioned, you're absolutely right, that humans would sort of try to feed the computer as much knowledge as they already had, that they had painstakingly worked out. And they would give that and then say, we're going to couple our human knowledge with your brute force of calculation, and you're going to sort of use the two. This was a radical new approach where it's like, look, forget about all our human knowledge, just forget about it. Instead, we're going to give you, we're going to let you work things out by yourself. And then what happened was that once they had this program, AlphaZero for chess, they wanted to see, they weren't going to test AlphaZero against the world's best human chess players. This was going to be too easy. Any program, any engine will beat even the world champion nowadays. It doesn't have to be a particularly strong engine. But what they wanted to do is they wanted to take the absolute strongest engine, traditional computer in the chess world, and they wanted to pit AlphaZero against that. And so there was a paper that was released that sort of showed the results of this encounter. And they played, I think, 100 games, and something like 70-ish of them were drawn, like 72 or something were drawn. 28 games were decisive, something like this. I may be, misrepresenting the figures a bit. But of all the decisive games, every single one of them was won by AlphaZero over Stockfish. Yeah. So the other engine was called Stockfish, and there was some controversy as to whether Stockfish was as strong as it could have been, and this and that. But today it's quite clear that this new approach using this machine learning has revolutionized chess, and to this day, chess players at the top actually do not use AlphaZero because this is proprietary. It's not open source code, and so nobody can actually purchase AlphaZero. But so the chess world was inspired by this approach, this machine learning approach, that an open source attempt at copying AlphaZero called Leela or Leela Zero was that project was launched, and Leela continues to evolve and is one of the most powerful engines, if not the most powerful engine today, and has actually changed the chess world. And basically, if you're a top grandmaster these days, you know about Leela, and you work with that engine on a daily basis.
Yeah. Was there any so as I said, kind of traditional chess knowledge, if we look at it from the point of view of opening theory, where kind of over time it was just developed that these first four moves are what theory says, then the fifth move maybe you can do this, but this is regarded as the best move, and so on and so forth to the levels of in top games you're getting 15-20 moves of opening theory. Something is kind of ingrained in the chess world as opening theory. Were there any big shocks kind of immediately from AlphaZero when this kind of occurred?
Yeah, I mean, it actually, since computers were introduced in the beginning, before pre-computer era, there were certain beliefs about how chess could be played and how the early stages of the game should be played. And the traditional chess engines, they revolutionized our understanding, and suddenly some things that humans felt collectively you cannot do, you cannot play this way, suddenly the engines showed actually you can. And then when the machine learning engines, so AlphaZero and Leela, when they came along, they did the same thing again. So that's crazy because it's very recent. It's only like a couple of years ago that these engines entered the fray. And since then, they've shown that some of the major paths that were considered reliable are maybe not so reliable after all. And it's already had a pretty significant effect on how chess is played at the highest levels.
I suppose if you can give a one-word answer to this, is chess solved?
No.
Yeah, I think the comparisons. I'll talk about the poker engines. So what you kind of described sounds like PokerSnowie, which is a poker program that effectively is taught the rules of the game and plays millions and millions of hands against itself and diverges onto kind of a good strategy. Then you have the other kind of popular one then is PioSolver. So what Pio does is it effectively, through like mathematical equations or whatever, it works out what the optimal solution is. So when PioSolver gives an answer to something, it basically says this cannot be exploited. This play is 100% game theory optimal. It cannot be exploited. the shortcomings, I suppose, with PioSolver right now is that it's only applicable in heads-up pots. Limit hold'em, there's loads of programs in limit hold'em now where that's basically a solved game heads up. So do you think chess, is it just a question of computing power with chess before we get to that point? I assume to solve the game of chess, you just literally have to recreate every single position and every single possible outcome. Is that how you solve chess?
Yeah, so again, this is sort of where there are much better equipped people than, you know, just a chess player or a chess trainer to answer these questions. I think, you know, if you asked a programmer who had sort of dived into that, they'd probably venture a better explanation. But my understanding of it is that if you take all the possible combinations within chess, it's like, well, what is the popular thing that they say? Like, there's more than the amount of atoms, yeah, this kind of thing. So it's an incredible amount of possibilities. But then I think I also heard before that, you know, you can look at it like that, or you can look at the game as, you know, sort of effectively solved, because you can strip away like a lot of the combinations that are totally nonsensical. And so you can sort of have it near solved. But for me, I think what I can say is I don't think that is relevant, actually. Like, whether the game gets almost solved or completely solved, I think there are strategies that will allow the game to continue to be like fertile ground for sort of competitive chess matches. To me, it's a bit like, let's say, you know, a robot can be designed that will run faster than the fastest human on Earth, but that's not going to lead to the, you know, 100-meter sprint going out of fashion, right? So the only real concern when it comes to competitive chess is to avoid any unfair use of computers. For example, if you're playing online, and you consult a computer during that gives you a massive advantage. But, you know, you could be consulting a computer of 10 years ago and it would still make you one of the best in the world, if not the best. And today that, you know, so
I suppose that's probably kind of where poker and chess aren't too similar, where this is very much kind of a new phenomenon in poker. And I think what you said about it's kind of irrelevant, Joe, whether chess is officially solved by the whatever textbook definition or whether it's effectively solved is kind of irrelevant in chess. In poker, I think poker, it's this kind of this GTO phrase is, you know, it's quite an interesting one. I think what kind of saves poker is just that there's always going to be exploits, and there's always, you know, because as we discussed earlier, it's a game of incomplete information. It's, you know, it's different to chess in that way because as you said, it doesn't really matter that much if it's solved or near solved. It's still better than any kind of resource you have, you know, out there at the moment. With World Championship matches now, what roles do computers and machines and programs play in those kind of matches these days?
Yeah, so they have played for the last, I would say, at least 25 years. They've played a very significant role. The way it works is that at the highest level, there's this kind of assumption that players, like, okay, at the very highest level, the margins tend to be quite thin. So if you can establish an advantage in the early stages of the game, known as the opening, then you're, you know, you can be, if you're good enough, that's like those tiny little edges you build up at the start, you're going to be able to sort of really hurt your opponent long term. With those edges, right? You're going to convert those edges. At the beginner level, I would say don't worry about those tiny edges and fighting for them, because most games are going to be decided by something else, right? Like if you drop a piece, if you make a basic oversight. So fundamental chess knowledge is much more important at most levels, certainly the beginner ones, but at the absolute top, which is world championship matches and things like this, they fight over the tiniest little edges at the start. And in order to find those tiny edges, you need to do a lot of research, investigative work in the early stages of the game. And of course, computers are going to support that work. Yeah. But if you're let's say either the world champion or the challenger, you actually have to cover so much ground. You cannot do it by yourself, just you and a computer. So what they do is they assemble teams of what are known as seconds, who are generally very, very strong grandmasters in their own right. Like typically, let's say the world champion is defending his throne. He might put together a team of 5 or 6 trusted colleagues and friends. But those 5 or 6 players are typically, most of them are going to rank, top 100 in the world, if not top 50. So they tend to be super strong players themselves. And then those guys are all working with the computers, and they essentially investigate a lot, and then they brief the world champion, look, and they also share their discoveries. Look, I found this, I found that, what do you think? And so what happens is you'll have a situation like a former world champion Bulgarian guy called Veselin Topalov. He one time he won a game, and he said, yeah, credit to my second, Ivan Cheparinov. I won this game playing this particular sequence in the opening. It wasn't my own discovery, but rather this discovery, the credit for the discovery goes to my second, my assistant of sorts. So that's sort of, that's how they approach it when the stakes are as high as a world championship match.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an area where the world in general can learn from. Machine learning now and data and information. There's an absolute abundance of it now. So learning how best to use kind of human knowledge and human interpretation with all this machine learning and data that we have now, I think is it's quite an important kind of path now that humankind find itself on. Especially I think again the crossover with poker is quite clear there, where you've got a lot of the best poker players in the world aren't experts at using these kind of simulation machines or these GTO solvers, but what they are very good at is they get the information from people that are kind of good with the machines. So it's another kind of interesting crossover where the person is kind of using the machine and learning from the machine as best they can. So Alex, just want to talk a bit about the chess industry kind of today. As you said, you ultimately moved on from the poker world, but remain heavily involved in the chess world. What's it like today? How's it like being part of the chess industry today?
It's a well-timed podcast because chess at the moment is actually experiencing maybe the greatest growth that it's seen. I mean, maybe since I was involved in chess. Chess is exploding right now, and I don't want to get into it when you ask me how's lockdown life for you, but a lot of chess players will tell you that lockdown has impacted their chess career very, very positively. Those who make a living online, and the reason for this is because chess, unlike a lot of other sports, chess is played, it's recognized as a sport by like most countries, and it's played like all the serious competitions have taken place in the real world, so to speak. Yeah. But now, since COVID-19 sort of took hold, what's happened is it's forced a lot of chess organizers to think about actually transferring some of those competitions online into the online world. And it's also, and so that's what's happened over the last few months. More and more events have taken place for like prize money and things like this, which was a rarity before, to have like significant prize money up for grabs in online chess arenas. Now that's quickly established itself as the norm. And of course, as a result of that, and as a result of all these chess organizers who, you know, were devoting their energy to in-person events, but now have all this time on their hands to devote it and have no outlet other than to devote it online. That's actually contributed big time to the boom. And so chess now is actually is thriving. And the one of the things is COVID, but another thing is that about 4 years ago or so, the first 4 or 5 years ago, the first people, the first regular chess streamers started to come along. So it's been popular for quite a long time to stream other games like Dota or Counter-Strike or whatever video games. But streaming chess is a relatively new phenomenon. It's only been the last 3 or 4 years. And that's been building up, but it really has accelerated and has exploded once COVID-19 happened, right? The foundation was already there, but suddenly we had this game where we had all these chess professionals who didn't know what to do with their time. And some of those have started to stream and to, you know, make online contributions to the development of chess. And the organizers, they're putting on events, and all of this is happening. It's all kind of coming together. I don't know if I'm doing a good job of explaining, let's say, how chess is evolving over the last few years. But in short, I would say it's as healthy as ever, and it's as popular as ever as a game, I guess.
Yeah. Just you mentioned a lot of the big tournaments being played online now with kind of big prize pools, similar to what we were talking about before. Is there any concern of cheating or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. There's a concern, but a lot of the heavy prize money tournaments, they're being organized with, like, let's say 8 players or something like that, usually strong players. And what they'll do is they'll force them to have some kind of webcam set up. So you might have 2 or 3 cameras. One will be covering your whole room, another will be covering your screen, and another will be covering your face, or maybe even a fourth to cover your mouse, or, you know. In this way, they make as sure as can be that the players won't be able to cheat, you know.
It makes sense, I suppose, for kind of the bigger events. There's going to be less risk, and then just the honor side of things as well. If you're caught cheating and something like that, I'm sure it's quite you're going to be shunned from the community or whatever. So it's probably not as big a concern. Do you think is playing chess? Do you think is there any talks about playing chess for money in the kind of sense that poker for money is played? Is there any way that could work?
Yeah, I think so. As far as I understand, there are some communities online where people are, like, let's say, forums and stuff like that. I won't mention any because I'm not a part of them, but I've heard from some gambling friends of mine that you can go into one of these communities and people build up a certain reputation, and then you can more or less trust certain members, and you can make bets on like some event, right? So for example, it can even be something as simple as me and you are playing a match, and some third person can go ahead and say, hey, you know, Jamie and Alex are playing this match next week. You want to bet on that? I'll give you, you know, 2-to-1 odds, or I'll use even money, whatever, and bet whatever. So I think a lot of that kind of stuff is going on. And I also know that there are some gambling websites that do list chess events, or have listed them in the past. So for example, one of the big events in chess is this year was the Candidates World Championship, which is a tournament that the Candidates Championship, which is a tournament that determines who will play the world champion, Magnus Carlsen, right? So the winner of that event gets a right to challenge the world champion. So it's a huge event, biggest event of the year. That's the kind of event where it's very unlikely that any of those guys are going to be cheating or rigging it, because the stakes are so high. So then it's a good environment to bet, and then the bookies can give the odds, can give different odds to different players, and that's, I suppose, same thing as if you bet on the World Cup. It's the exact same concept.
Yeah. I know Timex, Mike McDonald, he PokerShares is his website. They originated offering people the chance to buy percentages of poker players or bet on poker events. But I know that site has started some chess gambling recently as well, where you can bet, just as you said, betting chess matches like you bet in any other kind of sports. Um,
Can
yeah,
I, can I,
yeah,
can I
go on.
interrupt you there? You mentioned Timex. Actually, funnily enough, I don't know if I've even said this to you, but um, to show how much more of a crossover there is between poker and chess circles than there used to be. I think Timex actually dropped by my girlfriend. She streams chess, and Timex actually dropped by my girlfriend's stream the other day. Not because they know each other, but just because he found himself on that stream. And I gave you a shout out. I said, "Do you know my boy Jamie?" He said, "Yeah, I think so by name."
My claim to fame, yeah. That's interesting. I know Timex is he plays chess himself. Decent enough chess player. I think he's like in the 2000s.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, that's interesting. The whole, definitely just from poker Twitter world, everyone is big into chess now. I could list off several high stakes. It was always kind of a niche thing, I think, poker and chess and that crossover, but it's really kind of hitting mainstream now. Especially
yeah.
with, like Twitch now is obviously quite a big thing in both. It's reasonably big in the poker world, but in the chess world, it seems to be exploding. As I said,
Yeah.
a couple of non-poker, non-chess friends of mine have mentioned Nakamura's stream to me.
Yeah.
So it's Twitch streaming is definitely blowing up in the chess world, it seems.
But you speak of Nakamura. So for those who don't know, this is Hikaru Nakamura. I think 5-time U.S. champion. For a very long time was in the top 10. I think he's currently a little outside of that, maybe top 20 in the world. Absolute beast of a chess player. But he's actually now turned his attention to full-time streaming, basically, and he is, in my view, an absolute blessing to the chess world, because he's a guy who, one of the absolute best, but he's also into his Twitch memes and stuff like that, So he's there like with all this like Twitch lingo, like Moncas and da da da. I don't really know Pepe guy, all this stuff, but he'll do that. Like, and it's a big change from back in the day where chess was seen more of as like this gentleman's sport or something like that, and it would be beneath certain chess players, to speak in those terms. But Nakamura is part of this new wave of new approach to chess, new mindset, which I think is very healthy. Which is, chess is a game at the end of the day, a game, a sport, competitive, whatever, but it's not this thing that needs to be like elevated in some kind of like elitist kind of approach or something like this, which a lot of people, I think, used to see chess that way, and it made it maybe a bit intimidating. Now chess is just totally remarketing itself, rebranding as, a game that is as accessible as any other game. The rules are not rules are not that hard to learn. Of course, to master the game is incredibly difficult, but the same could be said of almost any game we've spoken about today. Certainly the same could be said for poker. I think poker had been, I remember when it was marketed so successfully back in like 02, 03, the moneymaker era. Poker was seen, I remember this idea that poker was a game that was very easy to learn, and very, like, it takes a minute to learn and a lifetime to master.
Yeah.
Chess was not thought of in that way. It was seen as a game that takes forever to learn, and then you're in pain and agony, and the only people who can possibly wrap their head around this game are the hyper intellectuals of this world. And this kind of perception of chess is not only wrong, but I think incredibly hurtful historically to the growth of chess, the popularity of chess. And I think the reason why now chess is popular is because you're finally seeing traction by you know, sort of the movers and the shakers in chess world who are saying, you know what, that's not the case, and we're gonna show chess for what it really is, and we're, you know, we're gonna put it in the conversation with all these other games. I think that's what's happened.
Yeah. The minute to learn and a lifetime to master. I think it was Mike Sexton used to always say that in the WPT broadcasts. That sounds like they're talking about chess there, actually, because it's that's exactly what chess is. It's quite quick. You know, you can learn it quite quickly, but then to get really good at it, like most games, it takes a long time. What kind of approach is being taken with the marketing? Is it a very kind of you know, specific approach they're taking, or do you think things just kind of came together? Or Joe, how is is it an industry wide thing that people are deciding we're going to market this differently?
There's a bit of both. They are, so for example, industry wide, I think a lot of people who are coming into chess are now people who actually have a sort of good business sense about them. Back in the day, if you had good business sense, as was said to me before by my former chess coach, he said, the smartest of the promising chess players are no longer here because they were smart enough to jump ship, right? Because they wanted to make good money, like in some cases. And it's like those guys, he meant it in the context of the ones who, like, you know, built these big careers and, you know, made good money. He said those guys, they left, you know, they were smart enough at 15, 16 years of age to see the picture and go. And you have a lot of cases like that. But nowadays, because chess has grown and also it's in the right direction, suddenly have the attention of a lot of people with a lot of business sense. I think that's what's happening, that there's a greater influx of professionals from more mainstream industries turning their attention towards chess. As an example, the CEO of one of the biggest chess websites in the world at the moment, he was previously the CEO of some trading, like financial trading platform, right? So that's an example. In the past, you wouldn't have seen as much of that because there was relatively little money in chess. So it didn't attract the attention of people who wanted to, you know, who saw the potential and wanted to sort of bring their business skills to it. So, you know, industry-wide, there's more business-minded people, for want of a better word, that are putting their focus and their energy into pushing chess forward. And then in terms of the specific strategy, if we go back to Hikaru Nakamura, one of his very, very popular strategies has been to collaborate with streamers of other games. And he's done this very consciously, approaching a lot of big names. And chess enjoys one huge advantage over other games, which is that it's hard to find someone who, you know, doesn't know someone who kind of likes chess, right? They mightn't have much of a level, but there's a lot of people who have some idea of chess. They learned the rules in their childhood. They did something like that because it's been around for so long. So you can find, let's say, popular streamers and popular content creators in other games and other fields who also happen to like chess as hobby players. And so if you approach those guys, you're suddenly driving a lot of traffic, a lot of potential interest from their audiences. So that's been a core strategy from what I can see from you know, watching the streams. At the moment, I think very soon there will be a tournament. I think it's called something like PogChamp Cup, and PogChamp. These are like Twitch terms, and it's basically a chess competition where I think the way it works is you will pair up chess professionals with these like streaming professionals of other games. And the professional chess streamers will coach the hobby chess players that are professional, and then those guys will all battle it out against each other. So it's like they're all this is a very clever way of
Yeah,
merging the two worlds, and that's why you're seeing a lot more influx from the poker world, but you'd also see it influx from other games if you were also involved in those communities.
yeah, yeah. As I said, from the from my Twitter feed, it's definitely a lot of different things are popping up. As I said, I follow quite a lot of poker players, some plenty of chess people kind of mixed in there as well. One thing that's popped up, I see Matt Staples, who'd be a well-known poker streamer, and Bill Perkins, who'd be just an all-round legend, being involved in some cheating controversy recently, or accusing people of cheating recently. But aside from that, they've been taking part in a game called Choker, so a mix of chess and poker. I've a very, very brief, very kind of limited knowledge of it. Can you explain what that is to me?
Yeah, so this is an idea. Okay, first of all, I should preface it by saying I don't know so much about Choker. I mean, I can tell you what I know, which is it's the idea to sort of combine the two games, right? Chess and poker, thus Choker, right? And the way it works is you don't play chess in its like typical form, but rather you play like a mini game version of chess, right? You get a few pieces. Okay. But where poker elements are introduced is that before you play out the mini game of chess, you have a round of betting as you get dealt cards, right? And the cards that you get dealt have a chess piece on them, right? Okay. And so you get like 5 cards, and you can actually see as you're getting your cards, as the cards are being dealt, and as you're doing these like rounds. How do I explain? So it's like the first 3 cards, you get them, and you already have an idea what kind of a hand you might get. Maybe it'll be good, maybe it'll be not so good, and you can then bet. Your opponent will do the same, and so you first round of betting. Then you each get a 4th card, and then there's another round of betting, and then you each get the final card, and then I think there's a final round of betting before you play the game of chess itself. And so this introduces, poker elements, where it's like, I know I'm going to have to play a game of chess, but I know, there's uncertainty about how good my opponent's hand is. And I can, maybe bluff, and I can, use all those poker elements. And it's a cool concept because, you can try to exploit players. It creates like different dynamics. For example, if somebody is a bit folds too much, a bit too timid, so you can try to bully them pre-flop. If, for example, you're also confident that you're a very strong chess player, like a much stronger chess player than your opponent, then you can use that against them. Your opponent has to adjust his strategy and play more timidly pre-chess, right? I mean, in the poker phase. But you can take more liberties and stuff like that. If you're a stronger player. And so that's the idea. I mean, in principle, I think it's a very interesting idea. It's not a project that I'm involved in, and my hands are sort of full with chess itself. But I like anything. I like to see. For me, the most important thing is that such kind of ideas are being tested and such initiatives are taking place, because I think it shows that the chess world is the chess industry is in a good place, that it's it's attracting attention and bringing to light these kind of experiments. Whether it'll still be around, Choker, 5 years from now, and establish itself as a very popular alternative to chess or to poker, or whether it'll transpire to just be a fad, your guess is as good as mine, but it's cool.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead right. It sounds, just from that description, it definitely sounds interesting. I think it's the same as when you create any new poker game or any new game. It's very tough to tick every box and have it, perfect, just as smooth as poker or chess or whatever. But just from that description, it definitely sounds interesting, definitely sounds fun. As I said, sounds like it could be very difficult to get it completely right, where there's still going to be quite a big difference between skill levels. Two chess players, I guess if they're more similar skill, it would work better. But so there definitely sounds like there's some limitations there. But I definitely agree that it's great that they're trying these things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the biggest issue it'll face amongst poker players, at least, is that you don't actually gamble on it, right? So these are just like play money chips, essentially.
Ah, okay. I assumed you. So the pot at the end of the poker round, you then play chess, and whoever wins the game gets the pot. No.
Yeah, but that pot is play money chips.
Ah, okay.
Virtual chips. You're out already.
Fair enough. Look, that could be. They can fix that at some point, but yeah. So final question for you, Alex. What do you think? What do you think about chess that makes it such a long-lasting game?
Yeah, I think it's just because it appeals to so many different people, that it has something for everyone, sort of, it's a game where, if you want to play it on a very amateurish hobbyist plane, then can be very good. It can be a lot of fun, can be very rewarding. And if you want to take it a little bit more seriously, then there's an environment there for you as well. There's all sorts of competitions that you can join and, bump up the intensity, and you can keep on going, right? So it's like broad range. You can enjoy it at almost any skill level, right? From the very beginner to the world champion, right? So there's something for everyone there. And also it appeals to many different interests that people might have. So for example, if you have an interest in history, there's a lot of chess history that you can dive into, like former world championship matches, different eras in chess, the romantic era, the hyper modern era. There's all this kind of history that has built up around it. If you like literature, you'll find great chess books written in all different languages over the years, and you can really dive into the literature of it. If you like, if you're more the analytical, kind of technically minded person, you can work with a computer for 10 hours a day. If you are more creative type, you can actually still build up a really high level without ever touching a computer. There's almost, no matter which way you slice it, there's something there for the chess player. And I think that's one of the big things that makes chess so appealing. There's a lot of angles you can take on it, so to speak. So I don't know if that's the best let's say explanation of why it's stuck around for so long, but that's my feeling anyway, that it just sort of caters to so many different people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Alex, thank you very much. If people want to find out more about you, contact you, you're not on Twitter, YouTube maybe, is that the best place if people want to find you?
Yeah, so my middle name, Astaneh, that's sort of how I'm better known online. So as rather than Alex. So if you YouTube Astaneh and then just chess, my YouTube channel will come up. So that's Astaneh, Astaneh Chess. And same, if you want to contact me, if you have maybe some chess specific question or anything like that, astanehchess@gmail.com. So either of those, worst comes to worst, they can also just bother you, Jamie, and then you can link them. Yeah, how about that?
By all means, I'll put links in the description below. As always, if you want to contact me, at jam_fly on Twitter. The podcast is now available on Spotify. You can listen to it on the website www.thelockdown.life as well. Thank you everyone for joining us and listening to us today. Alex, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of lockdown.
I plan on doing so. You too, Jamie. Thanks for having me on.